I am a 29-year-old woman, and I was married to my childhood friend who is 30 years old. We have known each other since we were 10 years old, but we didn't start dating until I was in my second year of college. When he finished college, he bought a house, and I went to live with him. We got married when I was 24 years old, and now we have 2 children, 5 and 2 years old. We have practically lived in the same house since college, but now we have bought a better one and we are getting ready to move. My husband is the only guy I have been with romantically, and our intimate life has always been stable. We used to have sex at least twice a week, which was quite frequent considering how long we have been together. My husband had a friend from college, let's call him Patrick. They were very close during their college years and were even roommates at one time. However, when they graduated and started their own families, they drifted apart. But my husband still invited him to family events like birthday parties and such. Patrick was a different race than us. Not that it mattered, but he was always nice when we were around him. I never thought of him romantically or emotionally, until one day when our family was moving into a new house. My husband and I had bought. We were organizing our garage because we both had professional jobs that kept us busy during the week. So we spent a weekend sorting through our old belongings. Most of these items hadn't been touched since our college days. While going through my husband's things, I came across a hidden stash of 3 condoms hidden among some old books. When I first discovered them, I thought my husband had cheated on me in college. I found them near his senior yearbook, and that made me believe it was solid proof of infidelity. However, I had my doubts, because they were too big for him. Also, during my second year when we started dating, we did use protection, but later, I started using birth control, and we stopped using them altogether. The condoms were found near his 4th grade books, which made me question the chronology even more. Even though they didn't seem to be his size, the chronology fit. So I decided to have a conversation with him about what I had discovered. His reaction when I showed them to him was different than I expected. He laughed and confirmed what I had already noticed. He explained that they were too big for him, and that they actually belonged to his friend Patrick. Found it surprising that they were still there. Preserved among the books, I asked him why he had them in his possession. If they belonged to his friend. He explained that his friends knew that this particular friend had an unusually large joystick, and they used to make fun of him in a friendly way about it. One day his friend had left them outside and my husband took them as a joke to make fun of him later. However, he completely forgot about them. I didn't feel entirely comfortable with my husband's explanation, but it made sense. I knew he could be goofy sometimes, and that he and his friends used to play harmless and playful jokes about things like this after the condom incident. I forgot about it for a few months, but one night, my husband invited his friend Patrick to join us at a sports bar to watch a football game. As soon as I saw Patrick, I couldn't stop thinking about what my husband had said to me about his size. It was like his presence ignited something in me that I had never felt before. I had never considered cheating on my husband, but after that night at the sports bar, I couldn't get Patrick out of my mind. At the time, I was pregnant with our second child, so I tried to rationalize my feelings, thinking maybe it was just the hormones playing tricks on me. I started asking my husband more about Patrick, even though I had no reason to contact him directly, and I didn't have his phone number. My husband started noticing that I would ask him about him more often, and eventually I stopped mentioning him. I added Patrick as a friend on Facebook and Instagram, but didn't post much, which made me feel a bit frustrated during the intimate moments. With my husband, I was upset that I couldn't stop thinking about Patrick, and that it seemed to make me come faster. After 2 or 3 months of struggling with these thoughts and desires, I realized that what I was experiencing was not healthy. So I made the difficult decision to unfriend Patrick on social media, even though I was too nervous to contact him directly. Then came the gender reveal party for my second child, and Patrick was there. Even though I was pregnant, I couldn't deny that the desire was still very much alive. I was afraid of those feelings, afraid of the possibility of falling in love with him, and terrified of exploring the deeper desires I felt for him. After having my second child, 2 important things happened that allowed me to spend more time with Patrick first. I decided to stay home a lot. This meant that I stayed home to take care of our children, while my husband went to work one day. I had a doctor's appointment, and I was late. I realized that I needed someone to pick up my son from daycare. I should have called my husband, but his job doesn't allow him to leave quickly, due to the type of work he does. On the other hand, Patrick had a more flexible schedule, and I had been wanting for a long time to find an opportunity to call Patrick, so I took a chance and dialed his number, not knowing if he would agree to help or not. I told Patrick that my husband and I were not available at the time, and he kindly offered to help. I informed the daycare of the situation, and since I had a personal relationship with the owner, they allowed Patrick to pick up my son. Patrick also had 2 small children, so my kids had a good time playing at his house while I was away. When I arrived to pick up my kids, it was clear that Patrick was a little perplexed by the whole situation. I could tell by his body language his wife was also present when I went to pick up my kids. But I didn't feel uncomfortable about it after I left his house. I sent Patrick a text, apologizing for putting him in that situation, and promising him that I would owe him a favor in return. He replied kindly, and he was delighted to help, and that it was a pleasure. After that day, I started a text conversation with Patrick. I told him that I wish I had a job that offered the flexibility that he had, and so began our friendship by text messages. As time went on, our messages became more and more friendly, the two of us. We were a little reluctant to overstep the boundaries of our conversation, but I must admit that I was often the one who took the initiative. I encouraged him to change our text chat to Snapchat, and he agreed. It made me nervous that his wife could read our text messages, because despite his friendly attitude, I had noticed that sometimes he looked at me suspiciously one Saturday, when my husband was at work. I asked Patrick if he wanted to accompany me to the store because I wanted to buy clothes. At first, he refused, explaining that he did not have a babysitter for his children, so I suggested that she bring hers so they could play with mine while we shopped. Patrick agreed to the idea, and we met at the store. I usually prefer to buy used clothes at second-hand or discount stores, because I like to find good deals. I am one of those who collect coupons and keep an eye out for sales. However, that particular day, my main reason for going shopping was to spend time with Patrick. I really liked having him there with me, because I enjoyed his company. Being by his side made me feel like a giggling schoolgirl. I couldn't control what I felt by his side. Although I had never had any intention of cheating on my husband, I was willing to do anything he asked me. I tried to be modest, but every now and then, I came up with excuses to break the physical barrier that didn't separate him. It was his turn back arms and held it there longer than I should have. Especially when his children were distracted, I could tell he understood where things were going. But what surprised me was that he didn't make advances or reject my physical contact. This encouraged me to take things further when we finished our shopping. He helped me with all the items I had bought while our children were in the back of our cars. I began to feel a little disappointed, because he wasn't hitting on me like I expected he was. However, he surprised me by suggesting and helping me with the items I had bought. He was quite sure I didn't really need help, but I was very excited when he made the offer. I tried not to accept too quickly, but in the end I said yes. I knew that whatever I had to do had to be quick because my husband had to back home in about 5 hours. When we got to my house, our kids were tired, so we decided to set them up in the game room with some video games before we started moving and organizing the things we had bought when our kids got into the game room. Patrick and I started unpacking the boxes of items I had bought. I went ahead, and he followed. When we got to the bedroom, I explained to him that they were old clothes that he wanted to try me on to see if I still fit. I told him that if he didn't think I would get rid of them. In response, he said that those clothes would definitely still fit me, and that I looked the same as when we first met years ago. His words ignited an overwhelming desire in me like I had never felt before. At that moment, I couldn't resist and kissed him. It's important to note that I had never been with anyone other than my husband, so the experience of having Patrick's hands on my body while we were kissing was incredibly intense and moving. I had never felt so excited as when he started to undress me, knowing that we were about to have a soul encounter. I didn't love him, and what we were doing was not making love. I was driven by a primal desire for a purely physical act. Watching him put on protection and then being intimate was everything I had ever fantasized about, and never experienced such intense passion. It was an incredibly unique encounter. And it's hard to put into words. All the solo experiences I had before were filled with love, security, and intimacy. But this was different. I just wanted to have a passionate and physical connection with someone I wanted intensely, and it felt absolutely incredible. I could feel his strong back under my hands, his lips, on my neck, and everything was so amazing. I honestly can't say how many times I climaxed, or if it was just one time continuously, because every time I started to come to my senses, I realized what was happening and it pushed me back over the edge. We didn't change positions during that encounter. He continued until he came. And then we both agreed to keep it a secret, because we knew it could end both of our marriages. When he left with his children that day, I felt like something had been unleashed inside me when my husband came home. I couldn't help but feel guilty. So I tried to be intimate with him more than usual. Deep down, I knew I couldn't stop when I started with Patrick. I have had sex with my husband many times since then, and I really enjoy it for what it is, making love with my soulmate. But I still crave Patrick. So we text and meet up at least once a week. To me, he was like that occasional cheat meal during a diet. I needed to be with him every week to experience him, to feel desired as a woman. I love my husband, and this secret affair fills me with guilt. But it also makes me feel like a forbidden date. Our affair continued for 5 months, and during that time we attended a mutual friend's birthday party. Patrick brought his woman, and I noticed he was starting to distance himself from me. When I texted him, he was taking longer to respond. When I finally asked him about it, he first mentioned that his wife was starting to get suspicious. Then he mentioned that he had started to feel guilty, and that he considered Patrick a friend. These explanations made me rethink our relationship, because I thought maybe he didn't like me anymore. I probably should have left things as they were, but I couldn't resist the urge to foreclose. So I convinced him to meet me at a coffee shop so we could end our affair when we met. I found out that after the mutual friend's birthday party, Patrick's wife had confronted him because she had a suspicion. Although no concrete proof, and I felt remorse, wondering if something he had done at the party had given him away, perhaps unintentionally. Despite this, I convinced him that we should have one last meeting and then separate forever. He reluctantly agreed, and we went to a hotel to have one last intimate moment. It was an intense experience knowing that it would be our last meeting, because we did not want to endanger our marriages any further. About 5 hours after leaving the hotel, I received a sinister text message from Patrick that simply said, "Does he know?" I panic seized me and replied, "What does your wife know?" I immediately called him, desperate for answers. Patrick informed me that his wife was crying and heartbroken because he had concrete proof of our activities. He had proof that we went to and from the coffee shop, as well as that we entered and left the hotel. My heart sank into my stomach, and I could not help but think in what this revelation could mean for my own marriage. If my husband found out, I asked Patrick if his wife intended to share this trial with my husband, but he explained that she was still dealing with the turmoil of her own marriage and had no answer. Panicking, I raised my voice and yelled at them, urging them out anxiety, and screamed louder and louder. Patrick also became angry with me The conversation escalated to the point that he hung up on me. It was obvious that we were both overwhelmed and panicking. I tried to call Patrick again, but he didn't answer. Desperate, I sent him a text message apologizing for having raised my voice at him earlier. Then I went home and found my husband crying. I had all the proof that Patrick had mentioned, and it was the first time I saw the devastating impact of my actions on the man I considered my soulmate. We both cried together, and I asked for forgiveness. But he was inconsolable. My husband asked me how long the affair had lasted, and I decided to confess everything. I begged him to forgive me, and I promised him that I would go to therapy and do whatever it took to regain his trust. That day was the saddest of my life, because never before I had watched my husband cry and realized that not only had I betrayed his trust, but that I had done so with someone he considered a friend. We were both worried about what people would say if they found out, and the shame it would bring to our family. It was a moment of reflection where I realized how inconsiderate I had been throughout the entire affair and how insignificant I had ultimately been. After 2 days of trying to repair our relationship, I took the initiative to seek out a marriage counselor and also began seeing an individual counselor. I wanted to prove to my husband that I was truly determined to make our marriage work. During this time, we made the difficult decision to completely cut Patrick out of our lives. My husband called Patrick and expressed his anger and disappointment. Surprisingly, Patrick took it all on himself. Responsibility for everything, and offered sincere apologies even when it wasn't entirely his fault. I hoped that by focusing on saving my marriage I could help my husband, for I believed that Patrick's marriage was beyond repair. However, after 2 weeks of trying, my husband decided that the best thing to do was to do a trial separation for 3 months, during which time you would evaluate our relationship and decide whether we should stay together or go our separate ways. The same day that Patrick's wife discovered his infidelity, she decided to leave him simultaneously. When our respective partners left us, we held hands, secretly realizing that we had nothing to lose. At that moment, we agreed to see each other again, but unfortunately, we did not know that Patrick's wife had been monitoring his phone and had discovered our plans. She shared this information with my husband, encouraging them. Immediately, Patrick's wife, in a shocking turn of events, she decided to get back with him and started sending me threatening voice messages. I felt like I had lost everything. I had lost the love of my life, and Patrick too. I have tried to explain to my husband that I contacted Patrick because he had left us, and I didn't know what to do. However, my husband is going ahead with the divorce regardless of my reasons. I tried to convince him to take into account the welfare of our children. I suggested that we at least give a trial separation a chance, as he had promised before proceeding with the divorce. However, he stood firm in his decision to make matters worse. He took it upon himself to inform my family that I had been unfaithful, which I believe was unnecessary and should have been left as a private matter between us. Reflecting on my actions, I admit that I was wrong. Looking back, I deeply regret having started the adventure, but I still wish I had handled the situation differently. I feel remorse for my actions and long for the times when our relationship was simpler and more harmonious.